Welcome to the Art Matrix. This is the continuing series of the Haryana Arts Leadership Council, and we bring to you another episode. And I'm Komal Gupta, President of the Haryana Arts Leadership Council. The Art Matrix is an innovative initiative spearheaded by the Haryana Council, and it represents a dynamic intersection of arts, ideas, and entrepreneurship. And today I'm so happy to present to you Lauren Bath. She is a trailblazing digital influencer and Australia's first professional Instagrammer. Welcome, Lauren. We're so happy to have you here. But then there's an interesting twist to her story. And Lauren, would you like to take this further?
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me. I did indeed work as an influencer for many years, having quit my job back in 2013 to explore using Instagram as a tool to leverage a career working in tourism as a photographer. But when COVID hit, obviously the travel industry was shut down. And the vast majority, I would say 70% of the work I was doing back then was traveling to destinations and getting paid for that work. However, luckily for me, I had my daughter at the same time as the pandemic hitting. So I had already planned for taking some time off work, exploring some of the other avenues that I was working in, such as an event that I was running called the Travel Boot Camp, and just taking it easy as I adjusted into motherhood. So the change for me with the pandemic was not so extreme because I'd already factored in that, I was going to have a daughter and all of these changes would be taking place. But when the pandemic stretched on, I joined forces with a couple of other women in business, and we did some virtual events, we did some virtual programs, and we ended up starting a new business, of which I became the managing director. And we scaled that business to 7 figures in the first 12 months of operation. That was predominantly business coaching. So we kind of fell into that kind of accidentally. And we were doing that for nearly 18 months, I think, when I fell pregnant with my second child. And when I fell pregnant, I really reassessed my life. And I know this happens for a lot of women. You really look at what's important to you. And I realized that the business, even though it was helping people and it was, quite aligned with what I felt my purpose in the world was, the vehicle wasn't right for me. It was taking too much of my time, too much of my bandwidth. There was some, concerns around alignment with my business partners. And overall, I just knew it wasn't giving me joy. And I wanted to settle into motherhood, the season of motherhood. And I couldn't do that being the managing director of a 7-figure business. So I and my business partners made the decision to close that business down. I had a really extreme year of personal growth last year while I was pregnant. And in November last year, I had my second baby. And
Congratulations.
just really, I know that he's such a good boy. And I felt so powerful. I had a really powerful birthing experience. I felt so empowered. And I felt so clear that what I needed to do was actually take a step back and sit more into my feminine. I've spent so much of my career in my masculine energy, just, striving and achieving and earning and doing, and that masculine energy is just so completely ill-suited to motherhood. Motherhood is about receiving and intuition and slowing down and being this ball of love and connection with your children. So that's what I wanted to do, and I really, really put the brakes on everything. And, probably about 3 months ago, I was thinking, I'm not ready to be in business again yet, but I do want to be out there in the world making some type of impact. And I decided to start writing. I'm still a photographer, and I see photography as a tool that I use to tell stories. I consider myself a storyteller. And now I've started blogging and writing newsletters and sharing more detailed stories on my Instagram account, mainly through the medium of Instagram stories. So long-winded answer, I know, but but that's where I'm at. I'm back telling stories. I'm back doing the thing that I started doing way back when I started Instagram, which is just sharing, being a part of the community, having conversations, being connected, and not feeling like I have to have a big successful business to give me to give me a sense of worth in the world. I don't need that. So there I am. That's where I'm at.
Thank you so much. I mean, listening to you is getting into layers of thoughts, one after the other, after the other, right from being a professional photographer. I think you were a chef before
I
you went
was.
into, yeah. So something about that journey, what made you pivot into a totally different line of work?
Well, I think that chefing is a very creative career. Well, it can be.
Mm,
I was certainly a creative chef. My favorite part about being a chef was writing recipes and experimenting with food and coming up with new dishes. So I think I've always been a creative person, but the career of being a chef is not that fun. It's not very well paid. It can be quite stressful. The industry
mm.
attracts a very particular sort of person. And,
All
not
right.
to mention the hours,
Yes.
working so much and working
Mm,
nights and split shifts. And I had just reached a point in my career where there wasn't really much room for advancement anymore. And I didn't feel like I was growing and evolving in it. And I didn't love it anymore. The passion for me had gone from that career. Around the same time, I started dabbling with an app called Instagram, which was, really early, about a year after the app launched worldwide. So it was a very, very early adopter, especially in Australia. And, I would drag myself off my phone to go to work to chef and just wish that I was on Instagram more. So being on Instagram had me interested in photographs. Obviously, it's an image sharing platform, or it was back then.
mm,
So I moved from taking pictures on my phone to taking pictures on a camera, and I discovered I had quite a good eye for photography. So like all of that creative juice that I used to pour into my cooking, I started to pour that into my photographs. And then this community that I was building and the people I was meeting was what kept me going back for more. So when the time came where I thought there could potentially be an opportunity to do something with my Instagram account, which was when I had around 200,000 followers, maybe 18 months after I started, I just jumped. I was fortunate. I was living at home. I didn't have high living costs. And I thought, look, I've got money in the bank. I'm going to try this for 6 months. If I don't try it, I'll always regret it. And let's just
mm,
see what I can turn around. And I just started aggressively emailing tourism boards, and asking them to hire me, asking for money by any means possible.
mm.
And that's where it started. And I became the first professional Instagrammer in the country and one of the world's first working in that space. And ended up having, I think I did 250 travel campaigns over 8 years. I've been everywhere, every continent on the planet. I've been for paid work, Instagramming and working for brands and sharing my images. And yeah, it's been a pretty cool experience.
Wonderful to hear. And what I'm thinking of while I'm listening to you is there's a certain kind of a mindset that everyone is talking about, that you need to pivot from one career to another. And taking the strengths inside you, finding them and putting them to work. So, what kind of mindset do you think that you have? You believe that you have that strength inside. What would you say it is for us? I mean, for people who are trying to break through.
It's courage. It is
Mm,
courage. And it's interesting, I've done quite a lot of personal development over recent years, not back then when I first started and first made that
mm,
change. But, as humans, we love nothing more than certainty, because certainty keeps us safe. This is our brains at work. When you look back at early humans and the way that we've developed and evolved over the years, when we do something that's safe and certain, we can be sure that we as a species can survive. So our brains like really resist any kind of change. And if you've
mm,
ever had an idea to take your passion full time or start a business or pivot or change your career, you'll notice, like everybody notices, the resistance, like the mental chatter, all of the reasons under the sun why you shouldn't do that thing.
mm.
And it's legitimate. Like these risks that we take, these chances that we take, they can end badly. But if you don't try, if you don't
Yes.
try, you'll never know. And I
Mm,
guess like I had all the fears that anybody else who's been in the same position has had. I had them all. I had the very strong mental chatter, very strong resistance to it, but I also have good intuition. We all have good intuition. I should start by saying that, not just me. But I've been lucky enough that when it's really mattered in my life, my intuition has been so loud that I haven't been able to ignore it. And when the time was, around the time that I was deciding to quit my job, I say that my gut was screaming at me. And that's what it felt like. It just felt like if I didn't make the decision that I made, I would have regretted it forever and ever and ever. It was just, I had to do it. It was so uncomfortable that I had no choice but to take action on it. And, so many of us are, quite removed from our intuition. And certainly I am as well, because I'm busy. My mind is busy. My day is busy. We live in a culture that doesn't prize or prioritize sitting back and being mindful and being intuitive and being in our feminine. That's not the society that we live in. But yeah, those few times in my life where it's really mattered, my intuition has pushed me to be courageous and pushed me into action. And that's what happened. So courage is a mindset. And, a quote that I really loved back then and still love is to feel the fear and do it anyway. I forget who said that, but during times in my life where I have tried new things, and I've tried a lot, since starting on Instagram. I haven't just done the Instagram thing. I've had events, I've done an online course, I've taken tours to Zimbabwe, and every time I get that discomfort and that fear in my body, which, it just feels so bad, I really focus on that fear, and I'm like, oh yeah, like that means I'm doing the right thing. It's a reframe of the emotion. We feel that in our body, and it feels so bad and big and strong. But rather than thinking that's a big, bad, strong thing's telling me not to do it, I'm like, oh, that's the big, strong, hard feeling that's telling me to do it. So I lean in, like I physically lean in. I move my body forward so that I'm walking towards and moving into that feeling, because that feeling, on the other side of that feeling, is everything. It's trying new things, and it's potential to really change your life. So that's what I've done. That's what I've done over the years. I've leaned into that discomfort and been courageous and listened to my intuition, and I've just done the thing, because if you don't do it, then what? We only get
Yes,
one life,
I know.
or maybe many more, depending on your beliefs.
Yes.
We only get this life once, would be a better way to
Yes.
put that.
Yes. And I like your question at the end of it. If not, then what? That's the question mark. If I don't do this, then what? So listening to you, what I feel is leaning into your fear. As you said, you make this conscious movement, you lean into it, and you just jump into it. This is also kind of a life hack that one needs to cultivate. It's very difficult. The way you said, you kind of align movement to it. You align movement into the fear. You kind of immerse into it, and you move forward, and you just do it. That's it. Like the tagline is there, just do it. So that is something I think that needs to be cultivated. I think it takes a long time. It's not an easy process, isn't it? It takes some time.
No, I think making small, scary moves first,
Yes.
it increases your muscle, I guess you could say. So
Okay.
for me, it was a little different, because my first big thing was to quit my job, and that is
Yes.
not, it's not a small thing. But yeah,
That's true.
it is like a muscle. The more scary things that you do, the more things you try, the easier it gets over time, for
All
sure.
right. Okay. So that's something that we really need to take away, is to take the small steps, move forward, scary small steps, and kind of move on, lean into the fear. Like we have this saying in Hindi here, I'll just translate, डर के आगे जीत है. After fear, there's victory. That's what we say here. So what you said totally aligns with what is kind of understood. And it is not easy to lean into fear. And I think we need to take away and think about that. Another question is coming up now, since you have this huge, diverse professional experience, you've been in so many industries. You've been a chef, you've been a Instagram influencer, photographer, a managing director. Now you're a mother. And mother is also a very defining moment in a woman's life or anyone's life, being a father or a mother. I'm not saying that, but how will that affect your storytelling? Where do you think that all these experiences will lead to you in your storytelling? What do you have to share with the world with these diverse experiences?
Oh, that's a big one. I mean, having children is so formative. I never thought I would have children. I never wanted to have children
Hmm.
until I got to my late 30s. And, I reached a point where I was thinking about my life and its meaning and my legacy and what we leave behind. And I knew that my partner wanted children. He told me that we'd been together for 10 years by that point, and he'd always said he wanted children. And I was, facing this moment in time where if I decided not to have children, I would potentially lose my partner as well. So not that these are the right reasons to have children, they're probably not. But again, like I decided to feel the fear and do it anyway, and be courageous and lean into something that I didn't know, which was having babies.
All
I
right.
was very lucky, pregnant. I got pregnant quite easily. A few months into trying, I know a lot of women, and especially, once you've had children, you hear lots of stories, don't you, about miscarriages and about struggles getting pregnant and fertility and the whole thing around motherhood and parenthood. The whole thing is that it's so uncertain and it has so much power to hurt you. Because the second I found out I was pregnant, I loved that baby with every core of my being. And the thought that anything could happen to that baby while I was pregnant, it really weighed on me for the whole pregnancy. It's a very vulnerable, very intimate experience having children. So having that experience of being pregnant and having my daughter and then raising her and having my son, like that whole thing has changed me as a person, like so completely, so completely. And you learn vulnerability, you learn more about intimacy and love than you ever thought possible. But you also learn more about the human experience. I
Hmm.
find, especially my daughter is 3 now, watching her navigate her emotional experience, helping her and holding space for her when she's feeling big feelings, seeing how she behaves when she's hungry or tired. You can look at these little beings and just think like, wow, we are like not that complicated after all, and yet so complicated. It's
Hmm.
amazing to watch them. It's amazing. And I learn, like, the personal work and the personal development that I've done has just been absolutely skyrocketed through the experience of having children. So having them has changed me, and having been so changed has set me off on a new direction again. I was in this business and it was being really, it was successful and it was earning money and it was absolutely like ticking the boxes for my ego. There was a lot of external validation for my success. But
Hmm.
having children, just it makes that less important, because you only get time with your children once. They're only little once. You only get that experience of connection and love with them when they're small, that one time. And you have to be really careful with what you choose to spend your time on. And ultimately, like I said earlier or alluded to, I still want to have an impact on the world, but nothing is more important to me than having an impact on my children, enjoying the present moment, and loving my children, like being there and being a part of a family. That's everything to me. So it's really changed the way I think about business as well. We've also grown up in a culture that tells us that in order to succeed in business, we need to be burning the midnight oil. We need to work 100 hours a week, and entrepreneurship is all about hustle and grind. And I actually don't believe that anymore. And if in fact I'm proven wrong with my beliefs that it doesn't have to be that difficult, then I don't want it. Honestly, I don't want to work 100 hours a week. I've been there. I've done plenty of years of that sort of work, and it's not for me anymore. I believe that there is another way. And I think that when we access more of our feminine energy and our intuition, the universe will work with us, and we can get everything that we want with so much flow and so much ease. So that's where I'm at. I'm experimenting on myself. Like this one time living this life is a chance to experiment. And I'm just thinking, what do I feel like doing at the moment? I feel like writing. I feel like sharing. I feel like connecting with my community. And I feel like stepping into my motherhood and my power and my womanhood and just seeing where it leads me. I know what I want out of my life. I know the impact I want to have over my life. I know my purpose, but I just want to see if I can reach it in a way that feels more joyful and easeful and has me enjoy the journey a lot more, because it's not that enjoyable when you're working 16, 18 hours a day. that's not a good way to live your life.
Thank you so much. That was pretty eye-opening. You mentioned quite a few topics like leaning into your feminine side, and now being a mother, leaning into your feminine side, and wanted to share that story. That masculine side, you said, is done with. But I have a question
Not
for you. I
balance.
have a
I
question.
feel like balance.
Yes, that's what I want to talk about. This balancing of the masculine and the feminine, that work-life balance, as you said, the work-life, motherhood, dash, 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 everything balance, as they say. So any strategies you have in place, any life hacks, as they say these days? It's this new word, hacks. I don't like it personally, but there it is. So, because I think everything is individual or personal to a person according to their journey. There's not one single thing that can apply to everyone. So would you like to share anything that has worked for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad that you raised that, because I'm talking a lot about leaning into my feminine and business being quite masculine. And it's true that the way most of us do business, the way most of us do entrepreneurship is very masculine energy. There's a lot
Yes.
of doing energy. And you have to do things. You do. In order to succeed and to achieve goals, we do need to do things. I've spent my whole life doing things. I've been very, very much in my masculine for most of my life. That's the energy that I've brought to most of my work. And as with anything, when we recognize it or identify it, we can tend to course correct and go too far in the opposite direction. So
Yes.
I'm in a season now of being like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sit in my feminine and receive the magic. And, to be honest, probably that's going to be a slow way to get there as well, because manifestation and working with the universal energy does require us to act. It does require action aligned with our thoughts. So always in business, and especially, the business that I grew in Phoenix, that I was a managing director of when we were coaching, business coaching, a big belief of mine is that we need a balance of masculine and feminine in order to thrive and achieve in business. So I would say masculine energy would be things like strategic planning, actually sitting down and looking at, where do I want to be in the next 5 years? Where do I want to be in the next year? What is my 12-month goal? How can I break that down into tangible steps? Like, how do I measure it? What am I going to be working on? I'm going to sit down and do my quarterly planning strategy. That's like it's a container almost that holds us accountable to the things that we say we'll do. However, then that's masculine. However, if we sit down and we come up with a 12-month goal, and let's just say the 12-month goal is, I want to be a full-time artist, working 40 hours a week on my art and earning, $60,000 a year. That's your goal. If you break that down, if you're like, okay, so I would need to produce this many works, I would need to sell them to this many galleries, I would need to do this many prints, I would need this many Instagram followers. If you break it all down like that and work just on those things with your blinkers on, like, I'm focusing on this, focusing on that, you won't see these other amazing opportunities that are happening around you. And that's the feminine, right? That's your intuition. That's your flow. That's the ease that can happen once you've set a goal and you're taking action towards it. So when you're doing your strategic planning, like, absolutely take action, have your goals, have your action items, the actual tasks that you're working on, but don't shut this off. Don't forget, like, you might have one person walk into your life, and if you entertain a conversation with this person, they might buy one piece of your art for $60,000. So all of a sudden you've reached your goal in one conversation. But if you're not open to those sorts of opportunities because you're so focused on this, like these are the tasks I must do, you won't see that coming into your life. So definitely bring the masculine, definitely have goals, definitely take action, definitely there are tasks that need to happen to get us to our goals. But also remember that sometimes magic happens in the strangest ways, and you never know what's going to happen by saying yes to things. One of the reasons I said yes to this interview, and I often say yes to interviews, even, I have sometimes high school students reaching out to me and they want to interview me for an assignment that they're doing. I'm a busy person and I'm raising a family. If I say yes and I give an hour of my time to every year 12 student that wants to, write about me for their assignment, and yet I find myself saying yes because you just never know, like the weird little serendipity and just the energy that comes of these things. Like for me, human connection, saying yes to things, meeting people and putting myself out there, that is where I would rather spend my time than actually being like, oh, what's my to-do list today? What are my tasks that need achieving? So I don't know, finding a balance that works for you, I would say would be my advice. Remembering that it is a balance. You can't succeed purely on the masculine and you can't succeed purely on the feminine. You have to find ways to reconcile both and work with both.
Thank you so much. And that was that brought up a lot of thoughts. Again, I would add something more to this if I can. Now you talk about
Absolutely.
my work-life balance. Then work-life balance again means boundaries. You're open to everything. You're open to the magic. You're open to intuition. You're open to your work. Then there are boundaries that surround you where certain things cannot get in. So what are the boundaries that work for you? Where this energy that you talk of exchanging, of giving plentifully and receiving it. So giving is tough. It takes a lot out of you. So where do you stop? Where are your boundaries? How does that work for you?
It's a good question. In the early days of my career, I didn't have any boundaries, and that was a trauma response. I was a people pleaser. I didn't like to disappoint people. I said yes to everything. And given that I was working so much as well, and I was saying yes to every like random scenario that came across my plate, I found myself really close to burning out all the time. An example, I would come home from an overseas trip and I would have 48 hours at home and I would agree to meet someone at the cafe because they wanted to pick my brain. And my husband, he was my partner back then. He wouldn't get to see me. And he's like, what? Why are you meeting this person at the cafe? You're only home for 2 days. Don't you want to spend time with me? And it just caused so many problems in my life. These days, I guess my boundaries would be I only work on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I start work at usually 10 o'clock and finish at about 4 o'clock. So I do short days as well, 6-hour days. And I just cram everything in that needs to be crammed in. If I have requests for interviews, today is Thursday, I made that clear in our communications. You'll also notice when you emailed me that I have an autoresponder that says I only work on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So I only generally reply to emails on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I list my phone number there if anybody needs to contact me urgently. I try not to. I've made really, really great progress with not using my phone very often. I've recently downgraded to a flip phone. It's not a smartphone. It's just a phone that makes and receives phones and texts. So I'm not constantly switched on. I'm not constantly checking my emails and my messages. And, I'm not addicted to the dopamine loop of like ping, 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 all these things that I'm checking and all this validation. So that's a good boundary that I have. I'd say I don't take any appointments whatsoever on weekends, even fun stuff like kids' birthday parties and hanging out with friends. I tend to want to wait until the weekend to decide what I have the capacity for. And go with how my energy is and my children's energy. Even if we do commit to a kid's birthday party, I'm liable to say no at the last minute because I'm just not feeling like it's a good energetic move for our family. What other boundaries do I have? I'm very conscious of who I give my time to, my personal time. I have a pretty small network of friends, and I don't like to waste my time with people who aren't, how do I say this? People who don't add value to my life. I know that sounds harsh, but life
Hmm.
is too short to spend a lot of time with people that are energy suckers rather
True.
than people that you that can meet, you can have great conversations with, and you can meet in the middle. So yeah, there's quite a number of ways that I use boundaries to protect myself and my energy and my time.
That's nice. I think
Oh, and I
we
should I
could.
should actually add that. I'll just add one other quick thing to that, because
Yes.
obviously people do want to meet me and interview me and all these sorts of things. I recently met some photographers. I was a part of a photography panel on the weekend at a photography festival. And two of the photographers that I met, we've reached out to each other and we've wanted to meet for coffees. And one of them I'm not meeting until next month, because I will only meet, I don't want to meet with people on my work days because I only have 2 work days a week. I don't want to meet with people on the weekend because, like I said, I don't like to make plans on the weekend. So basically, the only I have free to meet people is on a Tuesday, because my husband is working and my daughter's in daycare. I just have my son who's only 7 months. And, I only like to plan one thing on a Tuesday. I don't want to be running from thing to thing. So I said to one of the guys, yep, my next free weekend is the whatever it is, 23rd of June. It's like 3 weeks away. And to the other guy, it's the week after.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah,
Hmm.
if they have to wait, if you have to wait 16 weeks to get a sit down with me, that's just the way that it is.
Fair enough. I mean, it's true. I mean, we need to learn boundaries, and I think we can learn a lot from you because, again, then it's very difficult to maintain boundaries in a professional setup wherever you're working. All right, now that's a lot of serious stuff. Now, I want to ask you something. You've been a nature photographer, and any moment in that time when you were totally awed by something in nature while photographing, or any experience you'd like to share that really took your breath away about what life is and what life really is beyond where we are sitting right now? It's much more bigger. Any experience you'd like to share?
Absolutely. It's funny because one of the biggest feelings that I've been chasing since I gave up my business is that
Mm.
feeling of pure presence, that feeling that you get when you are so in the moment that the voice in your head just shuts up for a minute and you just feel all of the energy and the joy and the magic of the world that we live in. You feel it flooding your senses. And I had that experience recently. I had it at the start of the year. It was a strange story. And I won't go into it today, but it leads into what I'm about to share. I had that experience while I was making pesto. And whilst I was making the pesto and I had this experience of pure presence, I was like, I recognize this feeling. And I recognized it because I had felt that way on maybe half a dozen occasions during my travel career, when something awed me so much that I had no option but to just be there in it, experiencing it. The first time it happened, I was in Zimbabwe. My husband is Zimbabwean, and we would often go to Zim and visit the rural area, so the country, I guess, the country home, where it's all subsistence farming and everybody's very poor but very happy. And we were having an unexpected rainstorm, and I was sheltering with my camera underneath an old, you could call it a house, but a dwelling. And I just got this again, like this feeling flooded me, and I could feel the rain, and I could taste it. All of my senses were alive, and I had my camera, and I actually wrote a poem, the first and only poem I've ever
All
written.
right.
I wrote that poem while I was sitting there under this dwelling, in that moment. And I just never had felt like that before. I had never felt so alive. And I started to, it happened a few more times. It happened under the aurora in Finland, the Northern Lights. It happened at a roadside stall in Vietnam when I was eating boiled eggs with the really spicy chilies. And every time it happened, I equated it to travel. Like in my mind, it was linked to travel. But I think travel kind of gets us there easier because we're outside of our comfort zone and we are seeing these really amazing, awe-inspiring sights. And I never realized that feeling is actually open to us at any time. Like if I was completely conscious and completely mindful and completely aware, I could be sitting here talking to you and having that very same feeling. I'm not having that feeling. However, when I had that feeling making pesto at the start of the year, the not the voice in my head, but the knowing behind the voice, it said to me, this is inside of you. You can feel this way anytime you like. And I don't think that was the exact words. I wrote down the exact words straight after it happened because it passed in about 5 minutes. And I was like, wow, I could be on the side of the road. I could be picking my daughter up from daycare. I could be making pesto. I could be under the northern lights. Like I could be doing anything and I can feel this way. Like it's amazing. That's presence. And,
Yes.
when you read books from the gurus, when you read books from enlightened people, you know that feeling is accessible. And sometimes people can go months in that feeling, days, weeks, months feeling that way. And I'm like, I felt it for 5 minutes making pesto and I was crying. I was just like, the world is so beautiful. Like it was amazing. But yes, I also have had moments like that while I've been traveling. And I think it's an easier portal to get to that feeling.
Yes.
I don't know if that answered your question. I did go off on a bit of a
No,
tangent then, but
no, you didn't. There was a lot to take away from there. The most important word was presence. And another word that really struck me is a portal. I mean, a portal of time, of sense, of feeling, of whatever you can say. I mean, that stuck with me. And now coming to, since you talked about gurus and spiritually inclined people and spiritual people, any favorite books that you read or quotes that you like to share? Any specific ones?
Oh yeah. I've recently finished The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I think that's a really beautiful book. I read all kinds of random things that tie in weirdly. I read another one called Molecules of Emotions by a scientist called Candace Pert. That had a big impact on me. And I've recently read Stolen Focus, which talks about the epidemic that we're facing of our inability to focus. And that's kind of become a bit of a passion point for me. I've really, since giving up my iPhone and downgrading to the flip phone and looking at my habits, and I still reach for my iPhone because I'm using it to create content and watching, oh, my brain just wants to check everything and get those little pings of dopamine. So I'm quite interested in books around that at the moment. I actually just ordered a book and it's arrived. I got a notification it's arrived. It's about dopamine, fixing your dopamine addiction. I can't remember what it's called. I'll find out when I grab it. What else have I read? I read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert recently, which really, really inspired me with my writing. And I've just started 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, which is by the same author that wrote Sapiens. And I don't know how to pronounce his name.
All right.
After the photography panel that I was involved in on the weekend, we talked a lot about artificial intelligence. And I have, in fact, just published a blog post today about my takeaways from that conversation. So, I'm interested in thinking a little bit more about, the future of technology and how that will affect humanity. So, yeah, I'm a bit eclectic with my book, my book habits.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yes, AI is there. AI is there to stay, and how it affects us will have to be seen. It already has affected us in many ways, but then it's a linear progression how it goes. And before we end, and it's been lovely talking to you, what advice would you give, given the mental health pandemic and all these changes that are really fast and really difficult to keep up, both in social media as well as in life? Any advice you have to share?
I think people just need to have a lot more compassion for themselves. We live in a society where there's so much comparison, and I feel like we all carry a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And I know for myself, I constantly mother guilt, like everything I do, I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. It's just constant all through the day. But when I'm having a good day and I have enough space, I catch myself. I catch that thought, that's not true. That's not true. Like, don't say that. And giving yourself space allows you to have compassion for yourself. So any kind of mindfulness that you can practice, whether it's meditation, which I don't meditate anywhere near as much as I want to. Again, that's another thing. I should meditate more, another reason to feel guilty. But anything that gives you space, whether that is sitting for half an hour in the sun of a morning, being in the kitchen, cooking can be quite meditative for me. Anything to slow the thoughts down and to be more present and to be more grounded. Anything at all that you can do to just give yourself a little bit of space from that voice in your head is going to pay off. I'm a big believer in healing trauma, going back over your life and seeing the things that happened to you when you were a small person that had you form your beliefs, especially the disempowering beliefs. I think reading knowledge is power. There's so many wonderful books on the market on so many varied topics that helps you understand your human experience more, and just understanding that we're all the same. We all think we're so unique and we're so different to each other, and we have all these different beliefs and we're fighting, and we're actually not different at all. We're all the same. There's so many things that make us feel like we're different, that separate us as a species, but we have so much more in common than what we have in differences. So giving yourself space, reading, learning, knowledge is power, compassion, self-love, these are the things that will help you access your intuition a little bit more and just make decisions that give you peace, because we are supposed to live this life in a way that makes us feel good, to feel useful, to feel of service, to have peace, to have space, to love. That's what it's supposed to be, and it can be.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Lauren, it's been wonderful talking to you. I mean, what I take away and what everyone will take away once this interview is out is balancing your masculine, your feminine, feeling the presence, and being at peace with yourself, and that we are all one. And I think this resonates beautifully with your, new role as a storyteller, because your community will be feeling and reading about all this and we cannot wait to hear from you as you go ahead further in this journey. Thank you so much for being with us. Best of luck for all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always such a privilege to be able to talk about these things and to share. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye then. Bye.